The house looked exactly the same from the outside. Same white picket fence I'd repaired 3 times. Same rose bushes Karen had insisted on planting despite my warnings about the maintenance. Same driveway where I used to park my truck after coming home from deployments. Tired but grateful to be back on American soil. Now there was a lifted Dodge Ram with oversized tires sitting in what used to be my spot. Flame decals on the sides, aggressive stance, the kind of truck that screamed compensation to anyone who'd spent time around actual tough guys. I pulled my modest Honda Accord behind it and sat for a moment, gathering myself. 14 years in Army Special Operations had taught me to assess situations before walking into them. This wasn't a combat zone, but it felt like one. My chest felt tight, not from fear, but from the weight of what this moment represented. The final severing of a life I'd built, defended, and ultimately failed to save. I grabbed the manila envelope from the passenger seat, the last of our divorce papers that needed her signature, along with a few personal items she'd forgotten when she moved out 6 months ago. Her grandmother's jewelry, some photos, a book of poetry I'd given her on our 5th anniversary. Things that meant something once. The front door opened before I could knock. Karen stood there looking like she'd been watching through the window. She was dressed nicer than she used to dress for me. Fitted jeans, a top that showed she'd been working out, hair done professionally. The kind of effort that used to be reserved for special occasions when we were married. "Marcus," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "You're early." "Traffic was lighter than expected," I replied, keeping my tone equally measured. "I brought the papers you needed to sign and some of your things." She glanced over her shoulder into the house, then back at me. "Right, the papers. Come in, I guess." The living room had been rearranged. Our old couch was gone, replaced by black leather furniture that looked expensive and uncomfortable. The family photos that used to line the mantel had been replaced by abstract art that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Even the smell was different. Some kind of aggressive cologne that reminded me of teenage boys trying too hard. "Karen, who's at the door?" The voice came from the kitchen, deep and carrying the kind of authority that men use when they're marking territory. "It's Marcus," she called back. "He's here about the papers." Heavy footsteps approached, and then he appeared in the doorway. I'd seen him before, briefly, when Karen had picked up some of her things with him in tow, but seeing him in what used to be my home was different. He was big, maybe 6 feet 2 inches, easily 220 pounds, most of it muscle. The kind of build you get from hours in the gym and careful attention to nutrition. Tribal tattoos wrapped around both arms, disappearing under a tank top that was clearly chosen to show off his physique. His hands were wrapped in boxing tape, suggesting he'd just finished a workout. "So you're the ex-husband," he said, looking me up and down with obvious dismissal. "I'm Derek." He didn't offer to shake hands. Neither did I. "Marcus," I replied, keeping my voice level. "I'm just here to get some papers signed and drop off some things Karen left behind." Derek moved to stand beside Karen, close enough that their shoulders touched. The message was clear. This is mine now. "Yeah, well, make it quick. We've got plans tonight." I studied him for a moment. In combat, you learn to read people quickly. Who's dangerous, who's just scared, who's trying to be something they're not. Derek registered as Category 3. Strong, sure, but carrying himself with the kind of swagger that comes from winning fights in controlled environments against rules and referees. "I'll be as quick as I can," I said, pulling the envelope from my jacket. "Karen, if you could just sign page 7 and initial pages 3 and 12, we can get this finished." She took the papers and moved toward the dining room table. Derek followed, positioning himself between us like a bodyguard. The posturing was almost amusing, like watching a house cat try to intimidate a wolf. As Karen spread the papers out and looked for a pen, Derek crossed his arms and fixed me with what I'm sure he thought was an intimidating stare. "You know," he said, his voice dropping lower. "Karen told me all about you." "Did she?" I kept my tone neutral, not taking the bait. "Yeah, about how you were never around, always deployed, always putting the Army before your family. About how she felt like a single mother for most of your marriage." Karen looked up from the papers, her face flushing slightly. "Derek, you don't need to—" "No, it's okay," he interrupted, his eyes never leaving mine. I think he needs to hear this. She deserves better than someone who abandons her for months at a time to play soldier overseas. The insult hung in the air. Play soldier. I'd heard it before, from people who'd never worn the uniform, never held a dying friend in their arms, never made the kind of choices that keep them awake at night for years afterward. I said nothing. Derek took my silence as weakness and pressed forward. She's with a real man now. Someone who will be here for her, protect her, treat her the way she should be treated. That's good, I said simply. She deserves to be happy. My response clearly wasn't what he'd expected. He'd been looking for a fight, a chance to flex his muscles and show off for Karen. Instead, he got calm acceptance, which somehow made him angrier. Damn right she does, he said, stepping closer. And she doesn't need you coming around here anymore, bringing up old shit, making her feel bad about moving on. I'm just here for the papers, I repeated. Once this is done, you won't see me again unless there's some kind of legal issue. Karen finished signing and held out the papers. Here, Marcus. I think that's everything you needed. I reached for them, but Derek intercepted, his hand wrapping around my wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop me. Actually, he said, his face now inches from mine, I think we need to have a little talk about boundaries. Derek's grip on my wrist was firm, but not painful. In my peripheral vision, I could see Karen stepping back, her face showing the first signs of genuine concern. This was escalating beyond whatever she'd expected or wanted. Derek, let him go, she said quietly. He's not causing any problems. Derek ignored her, his attention focused entirely on me. See, here's the thing, soldier boy. I don't like the idea of you having any reason to come around here. Makes me uncomfortable, you know? I looked down at his hand on my wrist, then back up to his face. I understand your concern, but this is between Karen and me, legal matters that need to be resolved. Wrong answer, Derek said, tightening his grip slightly. Everything involving Karen is between Karen and me now. You're yesterday's news. I could have broken his hold in half a dozen different ways. Joint manipulation, pressure points, leverage techniques that would have had him on the ground before he knew what happened. Instead, I simply looked at him with the kind of patience you develop after years of dealing with hostile locals who think they're tougher than they are. I need those papers, I said calmly. Derek released my wrist but didn't step back. If anything, he moved closer, using his height and bulk to try to intimidate me. You know what your problem is? You think because you wore a uniform, that makes you some kind of badass. But you're not in Afghanistan anymore, buddy. You're in my house now. Actually, it's Karen's house, I corrected mildly. We bought it together. She kept it in the divorce settlement. The correction clearly irritated him. Semantics. Point is, you don't belong here anymore. You had your chance, and you blew it. You're probably right, I agreed, but I still need those papers. My continued calm was visibly frustrating him. He'd worked himself up for a confrontation, probably spent time in front of the mirror practicing what he was going to say to Karen's ex-husband. But I wasn't playing my part in his script. Maybe you didn't hear me, he said, his voice getting louder. I said you need to leave. Karen doesn't want you here, and I sure as hell don't want you here. Derek, please, Karen interjected. Just let him take the papers and go. There's no need for this. There's every need for this, Derek shot back, still staring at me. This guy needs to understand how things work now. Needs to understand that Karen has a man who will actually protect her. He rolled his shoulders and cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing in the quiet room. The gesture was pure theater, designed to show off the size of his hands and remind everyone present of his physical capabilities. You see these? He said, holding up his fists. These hands have put guys in the hospital. I fight MMA, train 6 days a week. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt, Golden Gloves boxer in college. I'm not some weekend warrior playing dress-up. I nodded politely. That's impressive. Impressive? Derek's face reddened. Buddy, I could put you in a coma without breaking a sweat. You look soft to me. Look like you've been sitting behind a desk instead of staying in fighting shape. It was true that I wasn't as bulky as Derek. Military fitness is different from gym fitness, more about functional strength and endurance than aesthetic muscle mass. At 5 feet 11 inches and 185 pounds, I was smaller than him by 40 pounds and 3 inches. But size and strength were only part of the equation, and often not the most important part. "I'm sure you're very skilled," I said. Derek stepped even closer, close enough that I could smell the protein powder on his breath. "Skilled? Brother, I'm dangerous, and right now, I'm feeling very protective of my woman." The possessive language was deliberate, meant to provoke me. My woman. Like Karen was property to be claimed and defended rather than a person making her own choices. "Karen can take care of herself," I said. "She always has." "Yeah, well, now she doesn't have to. She's got a real man looking out for her. Someone who won't run off to play soldier when things get tough at home." There it was again. Play soldier. The dismissive term that revealed everything about how Derek viewed military service. As some kind of game rather than a profession that required sacrifice and commitment. "I wasn't playing," I said quietly. "Weren't you?" Derek's voice was getting louder, more aggressive. "Weren't you playing hero overseas while your wife was here alone, dealing with real life? While she was working 2 jobs to pay the mortgage on a house her husband couldn't afford to keep because he was too busy collecting medals instead of paychecks?" Karen made a small sound of protest, but Derek was on a roll now. "That's what she told me, you know. How you'd rather be deployed than home with her. How you'd volunteer for extra tours because you couldn't handle being a real husband. How you'd come back all quiet and moody, expecting her to just pick up where you left off like nothing happened." Each word was chosen for maximum impact, designed to hit the guilt and self-doubt that every deployed soldier carries. The terrible arithmetic of service. Time overseas protecting strangers while your own family learns to live without you. "She may be right about some of that," I admitted. Derek's eyes lit up, sensing weakness. "Damn right she's right. And now she's with someone who puts her first. Someone who will be here every night, not just when it's convenient." He was working himself up, feeding off what he perceived as my submission. In his world, the gym, the cage, the places where he'd learned to be dominant, backing down was weakness to be exploited. "You know what I think?" he continued, his voice now carrying throughout the house. "I think you know you weren't man enough for her. I think that's why you're here being all polite and reasonable. Because deep down, you know she's better off with me." I looked at Karen, who was standing frozen by the dining room table, the signed papers still in her hands. Her face showed embarrassment, concern, and something else. Maybe recognition that the man she'd chosen to replace me was revealing sides of himself she hadn't seen before. "The papers, Karen," I said softly. Derek stepped directly in front of me, his chest almost touching mine. "She's not giving you anything until we're done talking." "I think we are done talking," I replied. "Wrong again, soldier boy. We're just getting started." He put his hand on my chest and pushed, not hard enough to knock me down, but hard enough to send a clear message. It was the kind of move you see in bars right before fights break out, the last bit of escalation before someone throws a punch. I didn't step back. Instead, I looked down at his hand on my chest, then back up at his face. When I spoke, my voice carried a different quality. The tone of someone who'd given orders in life or death situations and expected them to be followed. "Take your hand off me." Derek's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't remove his hand. "Or what? You'll call the cops? File a complaint? That's about your speed, isn't it?" "I'll ask you one more time," I said, my voice perfectly level. "Take your hand off me." "And if I don't?" Derek's voice had a slight tremor in it now, some primitive part of his brain recognizing that the dynamic had shifted. I smiled then, not with humor, but with the kind of expression that came from years of dealing with threats both foreign and domestic. "Then you'll learn the difference between fighting in a cage and neutralizing threats in the real world." The room went very quiet. Derek's hand was still pressed against my chest, but I could feel the pressure wavering as some part of his brain processed the change in my tone. Karen had gone completely still. the divorce papers forgotten in her grip. "What did you just say?" Derek asked, his voice lacking some of its earlier bluster. I didn't repeat myself. Instead, I simply looked at him with the kind of calm that comes from having been in genuinely life-threatening situations. The kind of calm that separates people who've faced real violence from those who've only encountered it in controlled environments. Derek tried to regain his momentum. "You threatening me, soldier boy?" "Because that would be a mistake. A big fucking mistake." "I'm not threatening anyone," I said quietly. "I'm just pointing out that there's a difference between fighting in a cage with rules and referees and the kind of situations I dealt with for 14 years overseas." I paused, letting that sink in. "You see, Derek, in your world, there are weight classes. Time limits. Doctors standing by to stop the fight if someone gets hurt too badly. In my world, the only rule was come home alive." Derek's face was getting redder, but his hand trembled slightly against my chest. "You think I give a shit about your war stories? You think that scares me?" "Should it?" I asked, genuinely curious. The question seemed to throw him off balance. He'd expected me to either back down or escalate to threats. Instead, I was treating this like an academic discussion. "I mean," I continued conversationally, "you train to fight one person at a time, in a controlled environment with medical support readily available. I trained to neutralize multiple hostiles simultaneously, often in the dark, often while under fire, always with the understanding that failure meant death, mine or my teammates." Karen made a small sound, maybe recognizing something in my voice. She'd heard before, but never quite understood. During our marriage, I'd rarely talked about what I'd actually done overseas. The missions, the close calls, the times when training and instinct were all that stood between making it home and becoming another name on a memorial wall. Derek's bravado was cracking, but pride kept him from backing down. "Bullshit. You desk jockeys love to talk tough, but when it comes down to it—" "Desk jockey?" I interrupted, and for the first time there was an edge to my voice. "Derek, I was Army Special Operations for 14 years. Do you know what that means?" He didn't answer. "It means I volunteered for the units that handle missions other soldiers can't. It means I spent those 14 years learning very specific skills for very specific situations. Skills that have nothing to do with sport and everything to do with ending threats as quickly and efficiently as possible." I took a small step forward, not aggressive but deliberate. Derek's hand fell away from my chest. "You want to know what I learned in 14 years of deployments?" I continued, my voice still calm but carrying a weight it hadn't before. "I learned that the most dangerous people are often the quietest ones. The ones who don't need to prove anything to anyone. The ones who've already proven everything they need to prove to themselves." Derek tried to rally. "You're trying to psych me out. Mind games. That shit doesn't work on me." "I'm not trying to psyche you out," I replied. "I'm trying to help you understand something important." "Yeah? What's that?" "That there are different kinds of strength. Different kinds of training. Different kinds of men." I looked around the room, at the expensive furniture, the trophy photos Derek had put up of himself in fighting poses, the general atmosphere of someone trying very hard to project toughness. "You train to fight," I said simply. "I train to survive. And sometimes, Derek, there's a big difference between those two things." Derek was breathing heavier now, his chest rising and falling as adrenaline flooded his system. But there was uncertainty in his eyes now, the first crack in his armor of bravado. "You're full of shit," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You're just trying to sound tough because you know I could kick your ass." I nodded thoughtfully. "You might be right. You're bigger than me, stronger than me, probably faster than me in a fair fight." Derek relaxed slightly, taking this as concession. "But here's the thing about my training," I continued. "Fair fights are for sports. What I learned was how to make sure fights weren't fair. How to end them before they really started. How to use an opponent's size and aggression against them." I paused, studying Derek's face. "You know how many different ways I learned to incapacitate someone without causing permanent damage? 53? You know how many of those require me to be bigger or stronger than my opponent? None." Derek's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Bullshit. Joint locks, I said conversationally, as if we were discussing the weather. Pressure points. Chokes that can put someone unconscious in under 10 seconds. Ways to disrupt balance and leverage that turns size into a disadvantage rather than an advantage. Karen had moved further back, pressing herself against the wall. She'd never seen me talk like this, with this quiet confidence about violence. During our marriage, I'd been careful to keep that part of my life separate from our home. You want to know the difference between us, Derek? I asked. You learned to fight to win tournaments. I learned to fight to come home to my family. You learned techniques to impress judges. I learned techniques to save lives, mine and my teammates. Derek tried one more time to regain control of the situation. All that military badass talk, and what do you have to show for it? Your wife left you. Your marriage failed. You're here signing divorce papers while a better man takes care of your woman. The insult was well aimed, hitting at the thing that hurt most. But pain and effectiveness in combat are two different things. I'd fought with broken ribs, with concussions, with grief over fallen friends weighing on my heart. Pain was just information. You're absolutely right, I said. I failed at the most important mission of my life, keeping my marriage together. I let my service become more important than my wife. I came home from deployments carrying things I couldn't share and couldn't let go of. Karen deserves better than what I was able to give her. The honesty seemed to deflate some of Derek's anger. He'd expected denial or counterattack, not acknowledgement. But that doesn't change the other thing, I continued. It doesn't change what I learned overseas. And right now, Derek, you're making the same mistake that a lot of people made over there. What mistake? Confusing the quiet guy in the corner for an easy target. I began unbuttoning my sleeves, rolling them up slowly and deliberately. It was a simple gesture, practical rather than threatening. But Derek's eyes locked onto the movement, and I saw his body tense. What are you doing? He asked, his voice tighter now. Getting comfortable, I replied, in case you decide to do something foolish. Derek's breathing was shallow now, fight-or-flight instincts warring in his brain. His training told him he could take me. His instincts were telling him something else entirely. Karen, he said without taking his eyes off me, call the cops. This guy's threatening me. I haven't threatened anyone, I said mildly, finishing with my sleeves. I'm just having a conversation. Bullshit. You're trying to intimidate me. Derek, I said, and my voice carried the tone of someone used to giving orders in crisis situations. I need you to think very carefully about what happens next. Derek stood frozen, his muscles bunched with tension, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead despite the cool temperature in the house. His eyes darted between my face and my hands, trying to read the threat level he was facing. What's that supposed to mean? He asked, his voice cracking slightly on the last word. It means you have a choice to make, I replied, settling into the kind of balanced stance that had become second nature after years of close-quarters combat training. Not obviously aggressive, but ready. You can step back, let Karen give me the papers, and we can all walk away from this like adults. Or you can keep escalating a situation you're not prepared for. Karen found her voice from across the room. Derek, just let him have the papers. This is getting out of hand. Derek's head whipped toward her, and I saw something ugly flash across his face. Stay out of this, Karen. This is between me and your ex-husband. No, she said, her voice stronger now. This is about some legal documents. That's all. Just give him the papers and let him leave. I'm not giving him shit until he understands his place, Derek snarled, turning back to me. Until he understands that he doesn't get to come into my house and disrespect me. Your house? Karen's voice rose. This is my house, Derek. My house that I'm letting you live in. The correction hit Derek like a physical blow. His face darkened further, and I could see his control slipping. Men like Derek, men whose entire identity was built on dominance and being the alpha in every situation, didn't handle challenges to their authority well. Semantics, he spat, echoing his earlier dismissal. The point is, this asshole needs to learn some respect. The only thing I need, I said calmly, is for Karen to give me those papers so I can leave. Everything else is your choice. Derek's hands were clenched into fists now, the knuckles white with pressure. You think you're smart, don't you? Think you can mindfuck me with all your military psychological warfare bullshit? I think you're angry and not thinking clearly, I replied. I think you're about to make a decision that you're going to regret. The only thing I'm going to regret is not doing this sooner. He took a step toward me, and I could see the commitment forming in his eyes. The point of no return was approaching fast. Derek, I said, my voice taking on the tone of command I'd used with soldiers under fire. Stop and think. You're about to assault someone in front of a witness, even if you win. And that's a big if. You're looking at criminal charges. Assault and battery at minimum. Maybe worse if I get hurt badly enough. Self-defense, Derek said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. You threatened me. When? Quote me exactly. Tell me one threatening thing I've said. Derek opened and closed his mouth, searching for words that didn't exist. I'd been careful to keep my language neutral, descriptive rather than threatening. You said you knew 53 ways to hurt people. I said I knew 53 ways to incapacitate someone without causing permanent damage, I corrected. That's not a threat. That's a statement of fact. Like saying I know how to drive a car or change a tire. Karen was watching this exchange with growing alarm. Derek, please, just stop this. Let him take the papers and go. But Derek was too far gone now, too invested in his image as the protector, too humiliated by the way I'd remained calm while he'd worked himself into a frenzy. Pride and adrenaline were making his decisions now, not logic. 53 ways, huh? He said, trying to regain some swagger. Well, I know one way that works every time. He raised his fists, dropping into a fighting stance that looked practiced and competent. In the cage, it would have been intimidating. Here, in the confined space of Karen's living room, with furniture limiting movement and Karen as a potential casualty, it was just dangerous stupidity. Derek, don't do this, I said, and for the first time, there was genuine warning in my voice. You don't understand what you're starting. I understand perfectly, Derek replied, beginning to circle to his left, trying to cut off my angle to the door. I understand that you think you can come into my world and try to punk me with war stories and mind games. But this isn't Afghanistan, soldier boy. This is real life. This is exactly real life, I agreed. Which is why you need to stop before you cross a line you can't uncross. Derek feinted with his left hand, testing my reactions. I didn't flinch, didn't change my stance, didn't give him anything to work with. Years of training had taught me to conserve energy, to wait for the right moment rather than rushing into action. You know what I think? Derek said, still moving in that slow circle. I think all that tough guy talk was just bullshit. I think you're scared shitless right now, hoping I'll back down so you don't have to prove whether any of it was real. He was trying to provoke me into making the first move, probably hoping to claim self-defense later. It was a smart strategy from someone who understood how these situations usually played out in civilian courts. I don't have anything to prove to you, I said. I've already proven everything I needed to prove, in places where failure meant a lot more than a bruised ego. Bullshit, Derek exploded, his patience finally snapping. You're all talk, just like every other fake tough guy who hides behind his uniform. That was when he made his mistake. Not the verbal provocation. I'd heard worse from actual enemies who were actually trying to kill me. His mistake was letting his anger override his training. Instead of staying patient, waiting for an opening, using his reach and strength advantages properly, Derek let his ego drive him into a wild overhand right, the kind of haymaker that works great against opponents who are scared or inexperienced. I wasn't either. Time slowed the way it always did when violence became inevitable. Derek's right hand was coming toward my head in a wide arc, powered by muscle and anger but lacking the precision that might have made it dangerous. His weight was shifting forward onto his front foot, his chin rising as he put everything behind the punch. In the cage, against another trained fighter, the telegraphed nature of the strike would have gotten him countered hard. Here, in the real world, against someone with different training, it was going to get him hurt. I stepped inside the punch, moving at an angle that took me away from his power while closing distance faster than he'd expected. His fist whistled past my ear, carrying all his momentum but finding only air. My left hand came up to control his extended arm while my right found the pressure point just below his elbow. Not hard enough to cause permanent damage, but enough to send sharp pain up his arm and momentarily disrupt his balance. Derek's eyes widened in surprise and pain, but he was tough and well-trained. He tried to adjust, pulling his arm back and throwing a knee toward my ribs. It was a good recovery, the kind of combination that had probably worked well for him in training. But training and combat are different things. In training, both people are trying to win. In combat, one person is trying to win while the other is trying to survive, and those are very different mindsets. Instead of backing away from the knee strike, I moved further inside, getting too close for him to generate power. My right hand found his wrist while my left slipped behind his neck, and suddenly I had control of his posture and balance. "Derek, stop," I said quietly, my mouth near his ear. "This isn't what you want." He tried to muscle out of the position, using his size advantage to power through my grip. For a moment, his superior strength began to work, his body straightening as he prepared to throw me off. That was when I used his momentum against him. As Derek pushed up and back, trying to create space, I helped him along, but not in the direction he wanted to go. A small shift of weight, a precise application of leverage at the right angle, and suddenly he was off balance and stumbling backward. His heel caught the edge of the coffee table, and Derek went down hard, his back slamming against the couch before he tumbled to the floor. The impact drove the air from his lungs in a loud whoosh, and for a moment he lay there gasping like a landed fish. I was on him before he could recover, my knee on his chest and my hand controlling his right arm. It wasn't a position designed to cause pain, just to prevent him from continuing to fight. "Stay down," I said calmly. "Breathe. You're okay." Derek's face was red with exertion and embarrassment, his breathing ragged as he tried to process what had just happened. "Get off me! Get the fuck off me!" "When you calm down," I replied. "When you stop trying to fight." He bucked and struggled, but the position gave him no leverage. His superior size was now working against him, making it harder for him to maneuver while I maintained control with minimal effort. "I'll kill you," Derek gasped. "I'll fucking kill you." "No, you won't," I said with certainty. "You're going to calm down, and then we're going to have a conversation about how this ends." Karen's voice came from somewhere across the room, high-pitched with stress. "Should I call the police?" "Someone should call the police." "No need," I said without taking my eyes off Derek. "And we're just having a discussion about boundaries." Derek made one more serious attempt to throw me off, putting all his strength into a bridge that lifted both of us off the ground. For a second, I thought he might actually power out of the position. Then I shifted my weight slightly, found a pressure point along his collarbone, and Derek's strength disappeared in a wave of sharp, specific pain. "Jesus Christ," he yelped. "What did you do? What did you fucking do to me?" "Brachial plexus pressure point," I said matter-of-factly. "Disrupts nerve signals to the arm and shoulder. Temporary, but extremely effective." Derek's right arm had gone limp, pins and needles shooting through his fingers. He stared at his unresponsive hand in shock and growing fear. "You paralyzed me. You fucking paralyzed me." "It'll wear off in about 10 minutes, I assured him. "Maybe 5 if you relax instead of fighting it." The fight went out of Derek all at once. One moment he was struggling and cursing. The next he was lying still, staring up at me with something approaching respect mixed with fear. "How?" he asked quietly. "Training," I replied. "Lots of training, in very specific circumstances, for very specific purposes." I maintained the position for another 30 seconds, making sure he was truly done fighting, then carefully moved away. Derek remained on the floor, flexing his fingers as feeling slowly returned to his arm. "That was 53 ways, huh?" he asked, sitting up slowly. "That was one way," I corrected, "and I was trying not to hurt you." Derek looked at his arm, then at me, then at Karen, who was still pressed against the far wall. The full scope of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. "You could have really fucked me up, couldn't you?" he said. "Yes," I answered honestly. "But that wasn't the point." "Then what was the point?" I stood up, brushing dust off my pants, and looked down at Derek still sitting on Karen's floor. The point was to stop a fight that didn't need to happen. The point was to show you that all that aggression and posturing was unnecessary. Derek struggled to his feet, wincing as his arm tingled back to full sensation. His whole demeanor had changed, the swagger gone, replaced by something more thoughtful and considerably more humble. "Karen?" I said, turning toward her. "The papers?" She moved forward slowly, her eyes wide, holding out the signed documents with hands that trembled slightly. "Marcus, I never knew you could. There's a lot about military service that people don't understand," I replied gently, taking the papers. "Most of it's better left that way." Derek was standing now, rotating his shoulder and testing his arm. "You really know 53 different ways to do that?" 53 ways to end a confrontation without causing permanent damage, I corrected. Plus quite a few more that would. But those aren't for situations like this. Derek absorbed this information, his face cycling through emotions, embarrassment, anger, and something that might have been grudging respect. "So what now? You going to tell everyone how you kicked my ass?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Derek, I didn't kick your ass. I stopped a fight that was about to happen. There's a difference. Feels like you kicked my ass. If I'd wanted to hurt you, you'd still be on the floor. What I did was controlled. Minimal force designed to end the threat without injury. That's the difference between military training and civilian fighting. We're taught to use exactly as much force as necessary and no more." Derek nodded slowly, still processing the experience. "And you learned this overseas?" "Some of it. The rest came from 14 years of training with people who'd been in similar situations. You learn quickly when your life depends on it." I folded the papers and put them in my jacket pocket. "Karen, I think that covers everything we needed to discuss. I'll file these with the court tomorrow, and we should be officially divorced within 30 days. She nodded, but her eyes were still wide with shock. "Marcus, all those years we were married, I never knew you could do things like that." "I never wanted you to know," I replied honestly. "Home was supposed to be separate from that part of my life. Maybe that was part of the problem." Derek cleared his throat. "Look, man, I'm sorry about the things I said, about the playing soldier comment. That was out of line. You were trying to protect someone you care about," I said. "I can respect that, even if your approach was aggressive." "Yeah, well, turns out I bit off more than I could chew." I studied Derek's face, seeing something different there now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the kind of humility that comes from discovering your limitations in an unmistakable way. "Derek," I said, "can I give you some advice?" He nodded. "Karen is a good woman. She's kind, loyal, and she deserves to be treated with respect. But she doesn't need a bodyguard or a protector. She needs a partner, someone who trusts her to make her own decisions and supports those decisions, even when they're difficult." Derek glanced at Karen, then back at me. "Is that why your marriage didn't work out? Because you tried to protect her instead of partnering with her?" The question caught me off guard with its perceptiveness. "Partly, yeah. I thought keeping the ugly parts of my job away from her was protecting her. Turns out it just made her feel shut out." "And the deployments?" "The deployments were necessary. The mission was important. But looking back, maybe I volunteered for some tours I didn't have to take. Maybe I found it easier to be needed overseas than to figure out how to be needed at home." Karen made a small sound, and when I looked at her, there were tears in her eyes. "Marcus, it's okay," I said gently. "We both made mistakes. The important thing is that we learn from them." Derek was quiet for a moment, then asked, "How do I avoid making the same mistakes?" "Talk to her," I said simply. "Actually talk, not just at her. Listen when she tells you things, even if they're things you don't want to hear. And remember that strength isn't about what you can force other people to do. It's about what you can choose not to do. Like what you just did with me. Like what I just did with you. I could have hurt you badly, Derek. My training gives me that capability. But strength is knowing when not to use that training. When to use exactly enough force and no more. Derek absorbed this, nodding slowly. I guess I've been thinking about strength all wrong. You're strong, I assured him. Your physical capabilities are impressive, and your dedication to training shows discipline. But there are different kinds of strength. The strength to admit when you're wrong. The strength to back down from a fight you don't need to have. The strength to let someone you love make their own choices, even when those choices scare you. I moved toward the door, then paused. Karen, I'm sorry for how things ended between us. You deserved better than what I was able to give you. Marcus, wait, she called out. There are things we should probably talk about. About why our marriage really fell apart. About the things I did wrong, too. Maybe someday, I agreed. But not today. Today is about moving forward. Derek stepped forward. Hey man, I know this is weird, but thank you. For what? For not humiliating me more than you had to. For teaching me something instead of just kicking my ass. I offered him my hand, and after a moment's hesitation, he shook it. His grip was still strong, but it wasn't a challenge anymore. Derek, I said, take care of her. She's special. I will, he promised, and I believed him. Tim, 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 Tim.